12. Ugly habits in old age that make people uncomfortable, but no one talks about them. Before we begin, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for taking time not just to watch, but to take care of the body that's carried you this far. You didn't even notice it at first, not when your neighbor stopped waving back as often, not when your son began replying to your texts with shorter answers, not when your granddaughter hesitated before hugging you goodbye, choosing instead a small awkward wave. At first, you brushed it off, just life being life, right? But now, something about the silence feels different, not the peaceful kind you used to enjoy with your wife during Sunday mornings on the porch. This silence feels hollow. It feels like absence, like a room where no one says what they're really thinking. You find yourself wondering, is it me? It's a chilly October morning in your quiet little town. The leaves outside your window are turning shades of amber and rust swirling in the breeze, like time itself reminding you it never stops. You sit in your favorite chair, coffee in hand, listening to the hum of your refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. It's been 9 years since you retired from teaching history. 9 years since you last stood in front of a classroom, watching young minds light up when they understood something important. Now, your world is smaller. Your schedule is slower. And though you once welcomed this calm now, you're not so sure. You used to be surrounded by conversation energy, meaning lately the air around you feels heavier, emptier, as if the connections that once tethered you to others have thinned, stretched across silence you don't know how to fill. Your name is Harold. You're 74 years old. You've lived through wars and weddings, funerals and first steps. People used to seek your advice, lean on your voice, laugh at your stories. You were someone people listened to, someone who mattered. But now, people seem to glance past you. Conversations feel shorter. Your opinions, once respected, are met with polite nods or quickly changed subjects. You want to believe nothing's changed, that you're the same Harold you've always been. But deep down, something inside you wonders if you're becoming invisible. You're not bitter, not angry, just confused. There's a quiet ache in your chest that grows a little heavier each time your calls go unanswered or your presence goes unnoticed. You start to ask yourself questions you never used to. Am I doing something wrong? Have I become difficult without knowing it? Do I still bring warmth into a room or just tension? So you try harder. You show up to family gatherings early. You compliment your granddaughter's hair, even though you don't really understand her new style. You ask about your son's work, even though he rarely asks about yours anymore. You nod, you smile, you try. But somehow, something still feels off, like you're pressing against a wall no one will admit is there. Then one afternoon, after everyone's gone home from Sunday lunch, you're tidying up the living room. As you reach under the couch to pick up a fallen napkin, your hand brushes against a crumpled piece of paper. It's a note, just a scrap torn from a notebook, and written in your granddaughter Lucy's careful handwriting it says, "Mom, I love Grandpa, but sometimes being around him feels exhausting, like I have to brace myself for something." Your knees feel weak, and you sit down hard on the couch. You stare at the words, reading them again and again. The page doesn't lie, and suddenly everything clicks. The shorter visits, the polite distance, the way people glance at each other when you speak. It wasn't just in your head. But here's the thing. You don't get angry. You don't crumple the note or storm into the next room demanding answers. You sit with it. Let it sting. Let it teach you. And for the first time in a long while, you ask yourself a harder question than most people dare to. What if I've developed habits I can't see, and they're pushing people away? Not because you're mean, not because you've changed into someone bad, but because aging does something subtle. It chips away at your self-awareness. It lulls you into patterns you don't realize have become uncomfortable for others. And now you're ready to face that, not out of guilt, but out of love. Because you still want to be someone people enjoy being around. You want your presence to feel like a gift, not a burden, so you decide no more, assuming it's time to reflect, time to learn, time to ask gently but honestly, what habits have I slipped into without knowing? You may be older, but you're not done growing. Stay with me, because in the next chapter, we'll shine a light on the quiet habits that might be slowly isolating you, and the simple changes that could restore the connection you've been missing. You didn't mean to stop caring. It wasn't some big decision you made. It was gradual, soft quiet. One morning, you reached for the same shirt you wore yesterday and told yourself, it's still clean enough. Then it was your hair, uncombed, slightly wild, and your nails once trimmed weakly, now a little longer than you'd usually allow. You weren't trying to let yourself go. You were just tired. Tired of the routine. Tired of thinking. What's the point? You're not going to work. You're not meeting anyone new. You're just at home, maybe out for groceries or a walk through the neighborhood. You convinced yourself it didn't matter. But it does. Because the people around you do notice. They may not say anything. Most of them won't, but they'll sit a little farther away. Their hugs will feel shorter. They'll start to avoid bringing the grandkids too close. You won't even realize it at first. You'll think they're just busy, but slowly, subtly, the warmth starts to fade. Not because of who you are, but because of what they think you're showing them. That maybe you've stopped valuing yourself. And that hurts, doesn't it? You've always been proud. You've lived through wars, some in the world, others in your own heart. You've taken care of your family, paid your debts, shown up when it counted. You're not weak. You're not someone who gives up. But lately, that energy, it's been harder to find. Getting up, getting dressed. It takes more than it used to. And some days, you feel invisible, like no one's watching anyway. But they are. They still are. You may not see the way your daughter glances at your collar, noticing the food stain you missed, or how your grandson wrinkles his nose just slightly before settling in beside you. You may not hear the hesitation in your neighbor's voice when she offers a handshake, or the subtle pause before someone sits beside you in church. But it's there, not out of judgment, out of quiet discomfort. And it's not just about soap and water. It's about energy, dignity, self-respect. When you let your appearance slide even just a little, it sends a message louder than you realize. That's what stings most, because that's not the message you want to send. You're still here. You're still strong. You still matter. The truth is, hygiene isn't about vanity. It's about presence, and presence is power. A clean shirt, fresh breath, combed hair. These small acts speak volumes. They say, I'm awake. I'm participating. I'm still living my life with intention. You don't need fancy clothes or cologne, but you do need to show up for yourself because when you do, people show up for you too. And it's not too late. You can start small. Lay out tomorrow's shirt the night before. Give yourself the extra minutes in the morning to brush your hair with care. Trim your nails. Wash your face with cold water. Look at yourself in the mirror, not with shame, but with recognition, with love, with commitment. You might be surprised what shifts. That same daughter who seemed distant might smile a little wider when she sees you tidy and alert. The hugs may linger. The conversations may deepen. People will feel your energy returning even before you do. And when they do, they'll lean in closer. Because what they're responding to is your spirit rising again. You haven't disappeared. You just needed a reminder, a reset. And that starts with how you care for yourself. So ask yourself this. When was the last time you felt proud of how you looked? Not because you were dressed up, but because you were present, aware, deliberate. You deserve that feeling. You've earned it over a lifetime, and now you can claim it again. So tomorrow, take one step back toward yourself. Start small, but start. Because self-care isn't selfish. It's a quiet declaration. I still matter. And the world hears that clearly. It happened again yesterday, didn't it? You were just trying to make a point. You thought it was funny. A little joke. Something you would have said without a second thought 20 years ago. But the silence that followed, the way your granddaughter looked down at her plate, or how your son's jaw tightened, that wasn't about being too sensitive. That was something else. And now you're sitting alone in your chair wondering, did I say something wrong? Again. You didn't mean to hurt anyone. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Not just in the world, but in the way people hear your words. What once sounded wise or witty now lands differently. Maybe a little sharper, a little heavier. Like a weight people didn't ask to carry. It's easy to shrug it off. Back in my day, people weren't this fragile. I'm just being honest. They know I'm joking. But here's the truth. Honesty without kindness becomes something else entirely. It becomes criticism. And whether you realize it or not, those little comments about someone's weight, how they raise their kids, the way they dress, who they love, they're leaving marks not always visible, but real. You may not see it when your daughter changes the subject. You may not hear it when your son decides to leave early. But inside, they're retreating, slowly, quietly. Because your words once, a source of comfort, now feel unpredictable, like walking through a familiar room, but not knowing where the glass is shattered. That's not who you are. You've always spoken from a place of strength of experience. You've seen enough to recognize what matters. But even wisdom can become brittle if it's not wrapped in care. And even the smartest words can fall flat when the heart behind them is hidden. So why do we do it? Why do we say these things? Sometimes it's fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not understanding this new world. Fear of losing your voice. Sometimes it's habit. A tone we picked up from our parents. A sarcasm that was once considered humor. And sometimes it's loneliness. Because when you feel invisible, saying something, even if it causes discomfort, is still a way of being noticed. But you don't need to speak louder to be seen. You just need to be heard with warmth. Try this next time. Before you say it, ask yourself, would I want someone saying this to my grandchild? If not, pause, reframe, choose a different tone. You don't have to silence yourself. Your voice matters, but your delivery. That's what shapes the impact. Because when you speak with gentleness, people don't pull away. They lean in. They listen. They remember. They don't see you as outdated or judgmental. They see you as a guide, a steady presence in a world that often feels unsteady. And here's something else no one tells you. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to outgrow old patterns. You're allowed to say, I've learned something new. That's not weakness. That's evolution. That's what makes you not just an elder, but a leader. Because at this stage in your life, you don't need to prove anything. But you still have so much to give. Your words can still light up rooms. They can still soothe storms. They can still shape the hearts of the people who love you. If you choose them carefully, and if you've hurt someone before, if a comment slipped out that made them withdraw, you can still heal it. You can say, I didn't mean to hurt you. I was speaking from my own experience, but I see now it landed wrong. I want to understand better. That moment, that apology, it builds bridges no advice ever could. Because what people remember most about you won't be your opinions. It'll be how you made them feel when they shared their truth. So today, you get to decide what kind of presence you want to be. A presence that corrects or one that connects. A voice that always has to be right, or a soul that always chooses what's kind. You're not done growing. And the best part is neither are the people around you. When they see you evolving, they're inspired to do the same. So soften your words, not because you're losing your edge, but because you've sharpened your heart. And let that be your new strength. If this chapter moved something in you, take a breath before your next conversation. Lead with kindness. Let your wisdom shine not through volume, but through grace. And if this message spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. You may be surprised how far a softened voice can travel. You didn't expect it to hit you like that, not after all these years, not after everything you've endured. But there it was, so small, so subtle, and yet it cracked something wide open inside of you. It happened during a family dinner. Your grandson, the one who used to run into your arms after school, was sitting at the far end of the table. The moment you started speaking, he glanced at his phone, then at his mom, then back down, not even pretending to engage. And for the first time, you didn't get angry. You didn't feel indignant or disrespected. You felt hollow, not because of what he did, but because of what it meant. He was pulling away, just like the others, slowly, quietly, like waves receding from a shore they used to visit daily. And deep down, you knew why. It wasn't your age. It wasn't that they didn't love you. It was that somewhere along the way, your presence stopped feeling safe, not physically, emotionally. They didn't know what version of you they'd get: the listener, the critic, the one who laughed with them, or the one who corrected everything they said. And that's when the realization landed. It's not too late to change how they experience you, but it has to begin with you. You sat with that for a while, not as guilt, not as self-punishment, but as a mirror. You remembered the times you cut someone off mid-sentence because you knew better, the jokes that didn't land, the unsolicited advice that was met with polite nods and tighter smiles. And suddenly, all the times you blamed them for being too sensitive or too distracted started to feel like misplaced weight. It wasn't about them growing colder. It was about you growing unaware. But this awareness didn't destroy you. It awakened you, because beneath everything, beneath the pride, the instinct to defend yourself, the weariness of aging, you still cared deeply. You still wanted to be the person they called first, not out of obligation, but because they missed your presence. You still wanted to sit at the table, not just as a fixture of family history, but as someone whose energy added warmth, comfort, insight. So you began to ask a new question. What kind of presence do I want to be in their life? Not the loudest, not the wisest, just the most human. That's when things shifted. You started pausing before speaking, not to second guess yourself, but to choose your words with care. You began asking more questions, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity. What's it like being your age right now? What's something you're excited about? And you listened, really listened, without jumping in with your own story, without trying to fix, just being there. You began noticing how people leaned in more when you let the silence breathe. You noticed how your daughter smiled when you complimented her parenting instead of offering advice. You noticed how your grandson laughed, actually laughed when you said, "Teach me how to use that thing. I want to understand your world too." You didn't lose your voice. You found a deeper one. And the most surprising thing, they started coming back. The conversations grew longer. The hugs lasted a second more. The invitations returned, not out of guilt, but joy, because something inside you had changed. Not in a way that erased who you were, but in a way that revealed the part of you that had always been there, just waiting for the noise to settle. You no longer needed to prove you were right. You just needed to show you cared more about connection than correction. And from that place, your presence became a gift again. They saw it. And more importantly, you felt it. You were no longer someone they tiptoed around. You became someone they turned to, not because you had all the answers, but because you made space for theirs. If you're still reading this and something inside you feels tender, good. That tenderness is where transformation begins. You haven't lost your power. You've just shifted it from being heard out of fear to being loved through grace. Keep showing up like this, and you'll be amazed how far love can stretch back toward you. You used to wonder if this was just how things end. The slow fade, fewer calls, shorter visits, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. A part of you feared it was simply the price of growing old, becoming invisible in your own family, slowly losing your seat at the table, your stories left untold because they've all heard them before. But now, you know something different. It doesn't have to end that way. Not if you stay awake to the moment you're living in. Not if you choose even now to show up with softness, self-respect, and curiosity. You see, aging doesn't strip you of relevance. What strips you of relevance is the refusal to evolve. But you've changed, not in loud, dramatic ways, but in small, sacred choices. You've stopped leading with opinions and started leading with presence. You've exchanged correction for connection. You've let go of the need to be right and found something deeper, the desire to be with. And the result? They're starting to see you again. Not just as the aging figure in the background of their lives, but as someone still full of quiet wisdom. As someone who knows when to speak and when to simply sit beside them and say, I'm here. You've re-entered their world, not by forcing your way in, but by gently knocking on the door and saying, I'd love to understand. And that makes all the difference, because now your legacy won't be built on how loudly you spoke, but on how deeply you listened. They'll remember the warmth in your eyes when they told you something hard. They'll remember how you didn't judge their decisions, but asked thoughtful questions that helped them reflect. They'll remember how safe you made them feel, even when the world felt confusing. And you'll remember that you didn't fade. You rose, not by clinging to who you were at 40, but by fully honoring who you are now. You'll walk down the street and feel lighter, not because your body is young again, but because your spirit is no longer carrying the weight of needing to prove yourself. You've earned peace, and you've learned how to share it. There's beauty in that. And yes, there are still hard days, moments when you ache for the past, moments when you miss someone who isn't here anymore. But now, instead of closing off, you reach out. You call. You write. You say, I love you more freely, because you finally understand. Time isn't a curse. It's a canvas. And even now, your hands are holding the brush. You can still paint something meaningful. Not perfect, not flashy, just real. A moment of laughter on the porch. A gentle touch on your granddaughter's shoulder. A pause in the middle of a busy room to say, I'm proud of you. These are the strokes that last. These are the ways we stay. And if there's one thing you carry forward from all of this, let it be this: you are not done. Your presence still matters. Your choices still ripple. Your words still carry weight when spoken with love. So as this chapter closes, don't see it as the end of something. See it as the beginning of a new way of being seen. Let your grace speak louder than your grievances. Let your growth be louder than your guilt. Let your presence be the gift they didn't know they still needed. You're not too late, you're right on time. If this story has stirred something in your heart, maybe a memory, maybe a shift, maybe a quiet, yes, you haven't said in years, leave a comment below. Share what spoke to you. And remember, you are not forgotten. You are not finished. You are still someone who matters. Thank you for walking this story with us. Let's keep writing what comes next together.